Hey guys, Pete here. This will be my Better Call Saul Season 5, Episode 1 recap and review. I've been a huge fan of Better Call Saul and the Breaking Bad universe that exists in, and have been excited for the final 2 seasons, and I'm going to finally make videos about them. Episode 1, which is titled Magic Man, delivered a really strong table-setting opening to the season, and I can't wait to see where things go. Spoiler warning, if you haven't seen the Season 5 premiere yet, this video isn't for you. Hit the subscribe button and click the bell for notifications, since I will be doing Better Call Saul videos weekly during the season, but then go watch the episode before you come back here to watch this video. Alright, episode 1 was written by showrunner Peter Gould and directed by Bronwyn Hughes, who helmed the Breaking Bad episode where Walter blew up Tuco's office way back when. We have begun every season with a Gene teaser, and season 5 delivers the longest one we've ever had. It picks up right after Gene got out of the cab following his trip to the hospital. He was spooked by the driver, who had an Albuquerque Isotopes air freshener hanging from his rearview mirror, and also seemed to be checking him out. He goes home to plan his next move, and we learn that he's in possession of a lot of diamonds. We don't know when or how he came to have them, but he keeps them in the same Band-Aid tin that he kept his rare coins that he lifted from his father's store in. This explains why he had the shoebox hidden inside the wall that we saw him remove during the season 4 episode 5 Quite a Ride flash forward to the Breaking Bad timeline. The diamonds represent Gene's last resort if things go sideways in Omaha, and it'll be interesting to see how he comes across them in the current timeline. He plays it safe for a while, staying away from work and listening to a police scanner, calling in to ask the other employees if there's been anyone around the store looking for him. Eventually he goes back to work, only to be approached by Jeff the driver when he's on his lunch break. But it certainly isn't clear what Jeff wants besides having him admit that he is Saul Goodman. Before he had to leave Albuquerque, we know that his face was everywhere. Saul Goodman's face was everywhere through his ads and TV commercials, and that made him sort of a celebrity. And we can only imagine that his face would have been plastered on the news after Walter White's death. Jeff doesn't do anything in the moment that is a direct threat though, but being identified is enough to send Gene into panic mode. He calls Ed the Disappearer again, this time asking for an adapter for a Hoover Max Extract Pressure Pro Model 60 instead of a filter. It's fantastic to see Robert Forster one last time, and Ed seems to know who he is and lets him know right away that it'll be difficult and the price would be double this time. It's been out there that Forster would be reprising his role one last time in this episode, having shot the scene while they were filming El Camino, and the most likely theory was that Gene would contact him for an extraction. The twist turns out to be that in the end Gene calls it off, saying, "I'm going to fix it myself." In the moment it was a big surprise with not much to indicate why he changed his mind, or what fixing it himself might mean. There's a lot to unpack here, so I'll visit the black and white dreary world of Gene Takivic after we get through the rest of the recap. The cartel side of the story is largely disconnected from Jimmy's transformation into Saul at the moment. Since we know how Gus and Mike's tales conclude, for my money, Nachos Journey has been the most interesting thread to think about. We don't really get a lot of actual Nachos stuff here though. At the beginning of season 5, he finds himself under Gus's control while continuing to operate in the Salamanca family business. One of the best new additions in season 4 was the arrival of Eduardo, aka Lalo Salamanca from Mexico, and why I love this character is because he's a little more dynamic than the other Salamancas, and he adds some unpredictability into Nacho's seemingly tragic arc. He pushes things along with a menacing edge under the capable and even personable facade. He starts out asking about Werner and Mike as Nacho and Crazy 8 are handling their collections, and winds up finding out that there are complaints coming in about the quality of their product. This leads to a trip to a street-level dealing spot where Lalo quickly discovers that some of the drugs are of a lesser quality, and that's not something he can let stand. He gets a meeting with Gus and Juan Bolsa to discuss the situation, and we learn the whole thing is a maneuver by Gus to cover up what Lalo learned about Werner at the end of season 4. The cover story is that the German was building a chicken chilling facility for the legit side of the business. While building that, he found out about the drug business and stole 2 kilos of the cartel's meth, leaving Gus with no choice but to replace it with product he bought locally. Bolsa seems more interested with getting back to making money, and he's he's willing to accept the apology and remorse from Mr. Fring, but Lalo is not convinced. He asks about the construction job, which Gus anticipated he would. He takes him to a new facility where he has Mike and the remaining Germans put on a show to try to convince Lalo that this is what Werner was working on. Lalo wants to talk to Mike, which Gus allows to happen, but on the way out, Lalo makes it clear that he knows it's a setup by mentioning the South Wall that Werner mentioned on the phone. Remember, there was more to the conversation between Lalo and Werner that Mike didn't hear, and it didn't come off like Werner was on the run for his life after getting caught stealing from his boss. There's also a side conversation here between Lalo and Balsa where he lays out the reasons again that he doesn't trust Gus, which if they weren't already obvious. We also get some confirmation that the Salamancas believe that Max was Gus's boyfriend, even if the show has never stated that explicitly. That's a theory that's been out there, and it certainly seems to be hinted at, but they never really come out and say it. But this means that the Salamancas will always suspect that Gus is looking for revenge. But Balsa makes it clear that Don Eladio values Gus's ability to make money. He values it enough to keep him around even if he doesn't trust him completely. Lalo also mentions Santiago when they're talking, and it means that we might learn more about Gus's origins in Chile. Mike Ehrmantraut is in the place where you'd expect him to be after killing Werner. He was as close to a friend as anyone has been to Mike in this story, and on some level, Mike seems to be blaming himself for letting things get to the point that he had to kill him. We see this come out as he's sending the Germans home. He ends up punching Kai in the face, which is something that he's probably wanted to do several times over in their interactions together. You could say that Kai had this coming. He does it after Kai says that it had to be done. Werner had to be killed. He says he was a good man, but he was soft. Then there's this nice comparison here in that Casper, another one of the German workers, tells him that Werner was worth 50 of you. And to that, Mike doesn't say anything. In his lack of a response, he shows us that he believes Casper is right. Mike's part of the episode ends in a meeting with Gus after the Germans are confirmed to be out of the country. The Super Lab project will have to be shut down while Lalo is in the States, and Mike feels like this means his work with Gus should be done, at least for right now. Gus tells him he's going to continue to pay him, and he think of it as a retainer, while Mike teeters on losing his shit in the face of hearing that Werner's wife has been compensated. There's a real tension between the two men, and only Gus's power keeps Mike in line. Ultimately, he walks away saying he doesn't want the money, but we know that's not how the story ends. It'll be interesting to see how their relationship develops to get to where it is where we see them in Breaking Bad, and I'm guessing that Lalo and Nacho and their stories will play a big part in that process. Jimmy and Kim's story picks up right where we left it at the end of season 4 as well. After being reinstated as a lawyer, he's filling out the paperwork to practice under the name Saul Goodman. The surprising thing here is that his reasoning for doing this kind of makes sense. He's built up a pretty big clientele selling burner phones. The people who buy the burner phones buy them because they're criminals in general, and they know the guy who sells them as Saul Goodman. Criminals are useful to him because they need lawyers, and how would they know to call him if he's named Jimmy McGill? But it only makes sense if we completely ignore what we know about Jimmy from season 4, where he spent most of his time unable to process what happened with Chuck. We know that he's deeply damaged, and to this point, he's only looked at that in his using it to his advantage to fool the members of the bar into thinking he was remorseful. Kim hasn't been able to find her footing after being duped by Jimmy's speech herself, and now he's off to the races to get his new practice up and running. He gives her a chance. He asks, is there an angle that he's missing? And she opts to just let him go ahead with his plan. Later, she tries to reason with him because she wants to believe that there is a better Jimmy inside there underneath that can return, and that ultimately he'd be selling himself short to practice under the new name and just going after these characters who he knows are guilty, his former customers for the burner phone. He shuts this argument down by saying that Jimmy McGill would always be associated with being Chuck McGill's loser brother. The name Jimmy McGill is burnt. By becoming Saul Goodman, he gets a fresh start, and besides, he likes it. This whole scene with Kim and Jimmy is so expertly crafted, from the dialogue to the performances, and when he tells her that this is why this works, I go too far and you pull me back, it just hangs in the room over them. We can't help but root for these two, even though we gotta believe that things won't work out in the end. We can understand how Jimmy thinks this is his best possible plan, and we can see how that makes it hard for Kim to get through to him and talk sense into him. From there, we get our montage. It's the Magic Man montage. We see Saul, he's set up in a tent to offload his remaining disposable phones. He uses them as a way to advertise his services. He has them set up with his number on the speed dial, and we watch him explain how he might be able to help several people based on what crimes he thinks that they are most likely to be involved in. Gilligan is there as security and to back up his claims of being an effective lawyer, and it's classic Saul, and it's fun, but it's also kind of sad because we know this process is the beginning of the end for Jimmy, and that the end probably involves something tragic happening to Kim. Throughout this whole episode, because Jimmy isn't really in touch with why he's doing what he's doing, we sort of track the whole situation through Kim's point of view. With Jimmy, when the phones are gone, we see he immediately changes his mind about the 50% discount that we saw them talk about earlier. He told her he wouldn't do it. Never mind that he was actually missing the point she was making about encouraging them to commit crimes, but he had come to the conclusion it was a bad idea, and then quickly reversed course here when he wanted to try to maximize his gains. Kim is fascinating because she's a character who is exclusive to Better Call Saul, which means we don't know how her story will end. We also don't know much about her backstory or her history before she got to HHM either. We know she mostly has her shit together career-wise, but there is also a slip in Kimmy's side too. She can see this direction that Jimmy's going is probably not going to end well, but she also likes this part of his personality in some situations. She's not a victim, she's a willing participant in the relationship and a willing participant in the scamming if there's a good enough reason to do it, and that's usually to help someone. As we watch Kim try to wrap her head around Jimmy's decisions and trying to figure out what she should do, we see the contrast of where they're at play out at the courthouse. Bill Oakley, the district attorney that we've seen throughout the series, and who's always had interesting interactions with Jimmy, he's a good character. He finds himself in a situation where he's confronted by a newscaster, which is actually just the film students that Saul hires to help him with his ad business. There's a setup where she is talking, and of course Saul is there to jump in at the right moment. He's able to say, "I'm Saul Goodman, and I believe that every man, woman, and child deserves justice at a price they can afford." So we see that the whole tent situation was just sort of a warm-up where he's going in front of his prior customers, more or less. This is his big coming out at the courthouse where he's going to set up this scenario that he can use to his advantage to get his name out there. And with that, everything is kind of set up for his fall. He is officially Saul Goodman. There's still several years between now and the beginning of where he shows up in Breaking Bad, but for the most part, other than Kim still being in the picture, the end is all but set up. After the stunt, we see Saul, he runs into Kim. He's got the bright shirt on, he's dressed like Saul, but he still seems like Jimmy, until it comes up that Kim is trying to get one of her pro bono clients to take a deal that is actually in their best interest. The kid doesn't want to do it. He likes the idea of rolling the dice and going to trial. Jimmy jumps in and offers to help, saying that he'll pretend to be the DA and that they can easily trick this kid into taking the deal. But we see Kim get upset, and she says with some anger, "I'm not scamming my client." But the kid, Bobby, he sees this and he wonders who it is, and she sees the opening and she goes ahead and scams him, and she does it by herself. It works, but this was something that she hadn't planned to do. She was actually quite against it, and this pro bono stuff has been important to her. This is how she balanced out the part of her job that she didn't like by doing something that made her feel better about herself. Jimmy hasn't been involved with this, and now that he has been, we see that like other parts of his life, this is starting to go quickly downhill as well. And we have to think that crossing this line is something that will haunt Kim in one way or another. If it's just in her mind and feeling bad about it, or this could come out that she just straight up lied to this kid, considering that Jimmy is going to be in the public spotlight with his advertising. We see her in the stairwell, and this is where the episode ends. And it's not like she's in a situation where she has to make this grand decision, or she might break and turn to the dark side or something like that. To me, it stands out as being kind of connected to that beginning when we see Gene and how miserable his life looked. We know that Gene is not happy living the life that he's living in Omaha, even though he got away with it. Seeing Kim here struggling with the situation that she's in, it just makes you wonder how her story ends and where she's going to be at and how she's going to feel in relation to what we see with Gene. And because this has been a long video already, I'm not going to speculate too much. We have a new episode coming out tomorrow, so I'll be making another video. So I'm going to wrap things up there. There's a lot of other cool details that I I'd like to get to and things about how the future of the season might go, but I'll go ahead and add those to the episode recap tomorrow after episode 2 comes out. In conclusion, it was a good table setting episode. It's the common way that they do it. They finish up whatever they left hanging at the end of the previous season, and they set the stage for the new season to come. The Nacho stuff is there. Lalo is a good addition. We don't see any Howard, but I'm sure we'll probably see him in episode 2. Kim seems to be the thing that steals the show here, and that's where my emotional investment is, since we don't know how she's going to end up. We know how Jimmy's bad decisions are going to leave him, so it's just a matter of watching how we get from point A to point B. But they've turned Kim into such a likable and complex and enjoyable character that it's just rough thinking about the fact that she doesn't seem to be around in the Breaking Bad timeline. So let me know what you guys thought about the episode. Let me know what you think about this season that's coming up. What kind of stuff do you want to see happen? What are your favorite theories? Let me know all about that in the comments. Please subscribe to my channel if you're not already. As mentioned, I will be making videos throughout this entire season and through the final season when that arrives next year. That's it for today. I'll see you tomorrow. Thanks for watching. I'll talk to you soon.